may or might not have happened. I can believe that it really happened, but from a story viewpoint, it just fit beautifully. Hi, I'm Kit. This is Vernon, and we just watched Ford versus Ferrari. So Vernon, what did we just watch?
We just watched a great sports drama about racing cars. This film takes an interesting angle that is kind of hinted in its title, Ford versus Ferrari. It's about two giants in the automobile world.
Yeah, I mean, basically Ferrari and Ford, these are household names which don't need any introduction.
But they are known for very different things. One's an industrial giant and one is a sexy race car manufacturer.
Which is true even today. And it was true back in the 1960s where this film is set. In terms of screen time, I think the corporate shenanigans is a lot less.
It's a lot less, but impact is felt really throughout the film.
Yep.
Decisions that normally are made by, let's say, the coach of a sports team in a normal sports movie, these decisions are questioned, subverted, and tossed aside by corporate boardroom maneuvers. This is quite interesting to watch.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have known.
So it's all very well integrated, the corporate side and the technical racing side, but also on the human interaction side. So it feels like one seamless story. Nothing really feels out of place, like they put it there just because they had to, or just for some flashy background. It's just a fantastic, well-paced, very detailed and realistic movie.
Yeah, I agree with you that the script is very well written, because it's a hallmark of a great script for me is that there's no extra fat. Characters do what they need to do and not a bit more. The plot develops in sync with the characters that are set up and the situations they're put in, and not a bit more. There's very little fat in it.
So to be clear, we don't know much about what really happened.
But it's very well told.
So we are going to analyze this mainly as a story. How true it is, how many liberties they took with the truth, we don't know.
Or whose biographies they eventually relied to tell this story. Well, we'll let you find out.
And it's important to say that because if you didn't know that this was based on true events and real people, you would think that it's too Hollywood. Everything is like too nicely dramatized. The events just happen so neatly that you feel that it has to have been made up.
For example?
The characters themselves, the two main characters, Carroll Shelby, this brilliant ex-racer turned car designer and car salesman, played by Matt Damon, and Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, who I totally did not recognize at all. I didn't know he was in the movie.
I swear he lost weight again for this movie.
They're such extreme characters that it's hard to believe that they would really be so successful in their careers.
You can't picture them working together, but they do work together very well.
They do work together very well, even though occasionally they do have some physical arguments.
Like the ones you see in the trailer where they just beat the shit out of each other.
But I mean, seriously, to be able to start up a race team from scratch and be a world champion in what, 1+ years?
Basically, they succeeded in their second try at the title of the 24-hour Le Mans race.
It's really more about Carroll Shelby and Ken Miles, with some time devoted to the Ford CEO and the vice presidents. We don't really see much of the racing team, which is okay. I mean, you've got limited screen time, so you choose what you want to emphasize. And for a 2.5-hour movie, they managed to not bore the audience, and they covered a lot of ground. You really felt like you knew the characters.
And you probably felt that you knew a bit of racing, the technical side of it.
Yeah, I'm actually more a Formula One guy, which I haven't followed for a long time. But what little technical stuff they threw around sounded realistic. You felt like you knew, okay, why was the car so good? Why did they win the race?
And why did they not win all the races before that? That was also quite important, I think.
Yeah, and like what I said earlier about this being like too Hollywood, well, the whole premise of this film is that this whole endeavor started because of a personal feud between Enzo Ferrari and Henry Ford II. So
yeah, basically Enzo Ferrari personally insulted Henry Ford and his company,
which may or might not have happened. I can believe that it really happened, but from a story viewpoint, it just fit beautifully.
What also feels very Hollywood about this film is, the themes that it sort of brings forward to us as the plot progresses, such as individuality versus teamwork, meritocracy versus corporate give and take.
But if you want to look at it from a Hollywood formula viewpoint, in terms of the character failing because of his character flaws and not being able to succeed until he recognizes his flaws and changes.
It's a very typical Hollywood superhero movie where the superhero fails all the time until the very end.
If you apply that formula, it's actually
somewhat predictable that they won't win until they win at the end.
No, it's actually the Ford Corporation, or the CEO, Henry Ford II. He's the one who has the character change, because they failed in their first race because the race team was too committee driven. So Carroll Shelby goes up to Henry Ford II and tells him, if you want to win, you need to put one guy in charge, which is me, and cut off all this committee stuff. And I did not see a character arc for Carroll Shelby, did you?
Carroll Shelby? I did see a character arc for Carroll Shelby. I think his character arc was quite similar or tied to Lee Iacocca's, where both of them are confronted with a dilemma. Can they suck up to the amount of corporate give and take that is required to get anything done in a big corporation? How do they suck up to it? How do they decide where to stand their ground? How do they decide to play along? How much to play along and how much to stop playing along? I think that was Carroll Shelby and Lee Iacocca's character arcs in this movie.
Well, I think Lee Iacocca didn't really have much of a character arc because he was like
In the background,
he was replaced by another vice president, which actually sounds more realistic. If this was like a pure fiction, they would have left either Lee Iacocca or the other vice president, what DB or something, run for the entire story.
because this Leo BB character is the one who basically plays the antagonist to Leo Shelby and Lee Iacocca. He's the guy who keeps demanding that Shelby ditch Ken Miles as a race driver for the team.
Actually, I thought Ken Miles had a better character arc, even though it didn't turn out too well for him, because he's the hot-headed one, the non-team player. And spoiler alert, at the end, even though he succeeds in the race, because he chose to be a team player, he actually got screwed over. So it was a kind of like a bittersweet ending. So, I mean, in terms of character change, yeah, he, among the main characters, his seems to have been the biggest change.
Yeah, but it's kind of very Hollywood in a way that
Yep.
all the major characters or all the major players in this movie have some character arc or some major change before the film ends. The Henry Ford 2 also has a character arc. He does have a change before the film ends, and so does Enzo Ferrari, who eventually, because of how convincingly he got beaten by Ford, actually grudgingly gives respect or shows some respect
To Ken Miles.
to Ken Miles.
Not to Henry Ford II. So,
Which is even more surprising because it means that he actually saw through all the shenanigans that were playing out within the Ford team, and he actually realized that Ken Miles was the diamond in the rough.
that's one possible interpretation, but it could be that he just didn't know anything of what was happening in Ford. So, yeah, but I mean, that's what good movies do, right? They let you make your own interpretation. And to talk a bit about the special effects, I think these days we don't really need to talk about special effects because it's just seamless. I mean, you don't know what is computer generated, what are physical cars, but the races do look good. There were like some scenes where the brakes failed, and they failed because they overheated, and then you see these glowing brakes on the wheels of the race car, and that looks very dramatic. Judging by today's Formula One racing standards, the Formula One drivers are actually very cool. They're almost like robots or computers in that they consistently repeat their laps. And my impression is that they don't get very emotional during the race because they're just too concentrated on making the correct speed, the correct turn at that exact split second at that very spot on the track.
Which I think is a point that is made in this film. Even Ken Miles, the hot-headed maverick genius driver, tells us and his son that there are a lot of goalposts in a race. There are a lot of gear switches, a lot of speed changes that you have to make exactly at the right time at the right place.
Yeah, but during the actual races, of course, they do show some competition and rivalry between the Ford drivers and the Ferrari drivers, and it does look natural. But if you compare it to the Formula One standard, I
Of
think
today.
it looks like an overreaction.
Okay. I think number one, maybe engineering technology for racing cars has improved to such an extent that the best driver of today is the driver who can robotically repeat and replicate lap timings.
Yeah, the controls are a lot more complicated now. They've got a lot more parameters to adjust. They've got a lot more information coming in to them also. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's possible.
Also, I think those were the early days of racing where personality and feuding seemed to be more prominent. I remember watching Ron Howard's 2013 film, Rush, about the rivalry between Niki Lauda and Peter Hunt. And that was a rivalry that was bigger than life. But even in the film, Ron Howard did make a very conscious point that when both of these drivers who were feuding with each other outside the track, when they were behind the driver's seat, they were all concentration. And that all the feuding and the ego play was just simply not there when they were in the car itself.
Because what one Formula One driver said is that because there's just so much happening, you are forced to concentrate. You just cannot think about anything else except your car and the track. So everything falls away.
Yeah, but well, the way this particular film shows racing, I think it doesn't agree with this view of racing. It's highly dramatized in a way, very Hollywood. Like you would have drivers glaring at each other instead of looking straight forward at the racetrack. It's quite Hollywood in that sense.
Yeah, but if you're not really into racing, it feels natural because that's what we would do, right? Yeah, so I really like this movie. I would definitely recommend it. I think it turned out better than Vernon expected. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, well, for a sports movie, this is rather long. It's slightly more than 2.5 hours. I was actually not very confident that the movie could be this tight, even at this length. But I'm surprised that it did tell a very coherent story, very coherent characters with the bare minimum of script or editing fat.
Yeah, so if a movie is well done, you just don't notice anything. You don't notice the editing, you don't notice the acting, you don't notice the script, the tricks, the storytelling tricks that they use to manipulate you. You don't notice the camera angles or movements.
Or the soundtrack.
So you just get engrossed in the story, and
Did it for both of us, right?
and I think one way that movies are useful is that it educates you, or at least makes you want to find out more about a subject. So I first heard about Carroll Shelby in the Need for Speed movie, and I didn't really bother to go and research him. But now with this movie, yeah, I'm definitely going to look him up and see what the real history was behind this guy.
Yeah, now, several years after watching Logan Knight, I finally realized that the feuding and the and the exaggerated personalities in the racing circuit is actually kind of real and not that exaggerated as I thought they would be.
That's all we got.
And we'll see you again next time.
Bye.